I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Alexander, Boris's Brexit proposal has been rejected by the EU. So, I mean, the strange part about this, Alexander, is that this is kind of like the EU rejecting its own proposal, is it not? I'm looking at, I'm looking at an article via the Mish Talk blog, and the title says "Brexit Irony: EU rejects its own proposal."
Well, I think this is essentially true. One can actually see what the problems with this proposal are for the EU, in the sense that what Boris Johnson is basically saying is that there will be, for this transition period until supposedly a final agreement is reached upon the future economic relationship between the EU and Britain, there will be a period when Northern Ireland and Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, are part of the same regulatory structure, but Northern Ireland will remain in the same customs union as Britain. These are actually, if I have to be frank, inconsistent and incompatible things. A regulatory system and a customs union go together. They're not something you can actually separate. You can separate them if you're talking about a free trade zone, but not if you're talking about a customs union. And I think the reality, the increasing reality now, is that anyway, the EU is not in the mood to negotiate or retreat even in the slightest way from the deal it made with Theresa May, because they believe, they are increasingly thinking that there's a high chance that there isn't going to be a Brexit at all, because they've seen all these votes that have come out of the British Parliament. They don't believe that the British Parliament is going to allow Boris Johnson to move forward with a no-deal Brexit on the 31st of October if the EU rejects whatever proposals Boris Johnson makes. So they're gambling that Boris Johnson will either apply for an extension, which they will grant, or that he will be removed from office and replaced by a new government, which will apply for an extension and then work towards either accepting Theresa May's deal or calling off the entire Brexit idea entirely. So I think that's why the EU is playing the game that it is. By the way, Boris Johnson has come in for enormous criticism from Remainers here in Britain because he's calling the Ben Letwin law, which mandates him to seek a 3-month extension if no deal is agreed before Brexit. He's been criticised for calling it the surrender bill. I think that's exactly what it is, and that's exactly what we are seeing now, because Boris Johnson has put forward certain proposals. You may like them, you may not. What the EU is doing is that they're rejecting those proposals, but they're not making any counter proposals because they're under no pressure to negotiate at the moment, or at least that is how it seems to them. They feel that they can simply sit back and the whole thing will be called off before the 31st of October, either because there's going to be an extension or because there's going to be a new government.
All right, so the new government would be a Corbyn government, but of course that's a no-go with the Remainers, correct?
Right. Well, this is, I think, where
EU miscalculation here.
Yeah, yes, it is. This is where I think they don't really understand British politics, because what has happened is that Jeremy Corbyn has said that he was prepared to form a caretaker government with him as Prime Minister, which would ask for a 3-month extension if there was no deal done before the 31st of October, and then would immediately call a general election in which that government would campaign on the basis that they would do a new Brexit deal, which they would then put to a referendum with Remain as an option. Now, that on the face of it looks like, from a Remainer point of view in Britain, like a rather attractive proposal. It's what the people who've been campaigning for a second referendum have been demanding all this time. But there's one catch in it for them, which is that they absolutely hate Jeremy Corbyn, and they cannot, under any circumstances, accept a government, even a caretaker government, in office for just a few weeks with Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister. And they certainly cannot face the idea of a general election in which Jeremy Corbyn campaigns as the incumbent Prime Minister with all the advantages that flow from that. So they have rejected that proposal outright. The Liberal Democrats, who are the other party, the other big left of centre party in Britain, have rejected it. And they are saying that under no circumstances will they even consider it. Now, the problem is that though they are refusing to agree to a Jeremy Corbyn-led government, there is no clear alternative to it. There is no one else who looks at all like he could form a government without the support of the Labour Party and was not at the same time Boris Johnson. It's either Boris Johnson or it's Jeremy Corbyn. And by refusing to accept Jeremy Corbyn as the alternative Prime Minister, the Remainers have in effect ruled out the option of an alternative government. Now, I think there's another point to say, which is that it's important to understand that if there was a no confidence vote, say on Monday, and Boris Johnson lost, Boris Johnson would not have to resign immediately. He would be entitled to remain as Prime Minister for a further 14 days whilst he tried to put a new Commons majority together. If at the end of those 14 days he wasn't able to succeed, only at that point, would an alternative Prime Minister who had more prospects of forming an alternative government be able to take over. Now, today is the 6th of October. I'm just giving everybody the date when we're doing this video. Monday is the 8th of October. That's the earliest day that a vote of confidence could theoretically take place. If we go forward, then Boris Johnson could, in theory, remain Prime Minister up to the 22nd of October, even if he lost a vote of no confidence on Monday. 22nd of October puts us beyond the meeting of the European Council, which is on the 17th and 18th of October. It's not easy to see how the European Union, I mean, they'd have to change their rules. No doubt they would do it. But let's say Jeremy Corbyn were to become Prime Minister on the 22nd of October with just 9 days left before Brexit Day. The European Union would have to reconvene in some form if it was to send them a letter asking for an extension, and if they were to grant it. It would not be logistically straightforward. Yes, they could do it, but the time now is running out. The time to do all of these things is running out, and it's not even certain that Jeremy Corbyn would be able to form a government on the 22nd of October, because it's not clear that on the 22nd of October he would be able to command a majority in the House of Commons. So my own personal view is that the time window for this option of forming an alternative government, a caretaker government, to replace Boris Johnson, is now closing. It's almost closed. And with every day that passes, it closes further. And I think it's almost run out. I think, and I don't think this is something the European Union understands, that this option is almost gone.
Okay, Alexander, so is Boris Johnson's plan then just to run out the clock? I mean, he's made his proposal. The EU's not hot on it. Not that the proposal, I think, was anything groundbreaking.
No.
He was probably expecting it to get shot down. What's the strategy then on Boris's side? Because you kind of outlined how the EU is probably looking at things. How's Boris going about this?
Well, now this is where we are now completely unsure, because Boris has given many different contradictory signals. On the one hand, he says all the time that he's going to comply with the Ben-Letwin law, what he himself calls the surrender law. But at the same time, he seems to understand that if he does comply with the Ben-Letwin law, he's going to be in very serious political trouble, because he will have angered a lot of people who he has said to them that he's not going, he's going to get Britain out of the European Union before the 31st of October. I'm not sure what his plan is. It could be that he is still staking his idea on a general election after the 31st of October. So he will ask for this extension. He will come back to Parliament, say, look, I've got this extension. I'm not prepared to go on further and longer in this way. I want an election as soon as possible, even if it's after the 31st of October, and I will go down fighting in that election, or I will win, and then I will go for a no-deal Brexit, if that's what it amounts to, in January. Now, that could be one option. I have to say, I think it's a very risky option for him politically. His other option is to try to find some way round the Ben-Letwin law, or simply to break it. Now, possible ways round. He sends a letter asking for an extension, hedges it round with all kinds of qualifications and conditions, which make it impossible for the EU to agree to it, so they reject it. So the result is there's a no-deal Brexit coming on the 31st of October. I think a fairly risky strategy. Second option, he gets one of his friends in the European Council to veto a further extension. There's been some talk about Viktor Orban of Hungary. For various reasons, I doubt Orban would do it. I don't see what's in it for him to do it. A much more likely possibility, I think, is Emmanuel Macron of France, who has made very clear that he doesn't really want the British in the European Union, because he sees the British as a drag holding the European Union back from further integration, and also as allies of the Germans on economic policy. And I think Macron has a much more statist approach to economic policy than the Germans and the British traditionally do. So it could be that he's going to get Macron to veto the extension. I come back to what we said in a recent video. It was very striking how at the recent UN General Assembly in New York, Boris Johnson and Macron were together a lot of the time. They were talking to Rouhani of Iran. They were doing all sorts of things together. And the Germans were kept well away. Now, is that possibly chance? Am I reading more into this than is true? Well, I don't know. But it's possible that the two men, Boris Johnson and Emmanuel Macron, have reached some kind of understanding. Be richly ironic, the most anti-EU politician in Europe, Boris Johnson, and the most pro-EU politician in Europe, Emmanuel Macron, coming together, in effect, to defeat the Brussels bureaucracy and Angela Merkel. But they both dislike Angela Merkel. They both have their own plans, and it could be that on this issue they might agree. Or, next option, which I think is the most plausible one actually, is that Boris Johnson says, I'm simply not going to comply with the law. The moment has now come. I have to write this letter seeking an extension. I'm not prepared to do it. You do your worst. What do the Remainers do? They go to a court. They get an injunction to force him to comply with the law. He breaches the injunction. Now, what do you do then? Do you arrest the Prime Minister of Britain on charge of contempt of court or contempt of Parliament? I don't see it. You could pass a vote of no confidence in him. But remember what I said. He could remain Prime Minister for 14 days. 14 days takes him beyond the 31st of October. So it could very well be that his calculations at that point are that if he breaks the Ben-Letwin law, he can still get a no-deal Brexit, and there's nothing the Remainers can do to stop him.
It sounds also shaky. I mean, I don't know.
Oh.
I mean, I'm listening to you, explain the different options, and it just sounds like there's no clear destination here.
No.
It's kind of a boat that's adrift.
There's no
on all sides.
On all sides, because what did the let's take that last.
Why can't they arrest him? I mean, it seems that they'll do anything to keep the UK in EU. Why can't they arrest him?
I don't think they would arrest him, because I think if they go down that particular road, the Conservative Party, which is the biggest party in the House of Commons, I think would go berserk. And the 17.4 million people who voted for Brexit would be very, very angry. And I think, frankly, if they start arresting the Prime Minister of Britain, we are in a major political crisis. Maybe they would be that fanatical and that desperate. I think it'd be a very, very dangerous thing to do. I think more likely, much more likely, in that situation, someone will propose that they revoke Article 50 before Brexit Day on the 31st of October. The great problem, Alex, the reason it is such a mess, and it is a total mess, you're absolutely right, and nobody really knows where all this is going, is twofold. Firstly, we've torn up our constitution. We have no rules that anybody understands anymore. We don't have rules. We have very complicated procedures which don't mean anything. Once upon a time, not so long ago, before 2010, if a Prime Minister lost a vote of confidence in the House of Commons, he had to resign immediately. Now he can hang on for 14 days. Once upon a time, if government prorogued Parliament, Parliament remained prorogued. Now we see the courts coming in and saying, well, we can decide whether that's proper and lawful or not. Once upon a time, the government controlled the timetable in the House of Commons. Now that's been taken over because the Speaker says, well, I can decide who can, whether the opposition can have as much time as they want, and I can just throw out any procedures that stand in my way before doing those sort of things. So we are in a political crisis because most of the country voted to leave the European Union. The Remainer majority in the House of Commons refuses to leave, refuses to let that happen. It refuses to let Parliament be dissolved. It is too frightened to face the people in a general election, or to confront the Prime Minister, who seems to want to put that decision of the people into effect. And so nobody knows where all this is going. We are in a complete impasse.
If they do vote to revoke Article 50, is it just a simple vote? I mean, do they just get the majority of the MPs to vote and that's it? Is that the process?
It's
done? It's over? Forget the referendum, forget everything, it's just done.
I think as I think it is. I think that is the position we would be in. I think all it needs is a vote by the House of Commons.
UK citizens, be damned. We don't care.
Be damned.
We don't care.
Exactly. And, I suspect that there are some very tough-minded people in the Brexit Party and in the Conservative Party who would not be sorry if that happened. Because they will say, well, now the Remainers have been exposed. They've always been opposed to Brexit, and they've been forced into a position where they have to make a decision whether they revoke Article 50 or not. The Remainers have been trying to avoid making that decision up to now, and it could very well be that in a few weeks' time, they have nowhere left to hide about that. They have to decide whether they're prepared to allow Brexit to happen as a no-deal Brexit or revoke Article 50. It could come down to that binary choice.
I mean, it's the death essentially of Britain's democracy, is it not? I mean, what do the people say that voted either to remain or to leave? I mean, it's over.
I'm glad you
Your
say
vote
that because
is meaningless.
I'm glad you say that because there are a lot of people who voted for Remain in the referendum who are extremely unhappy about what has happened since and the way in which that vote that took place in 2016 has been sabotaged and disregarded. There are lots of people with those views. I know about that. I've spoken to many people like this. So we mustn't forget that. That is an important point to make. Not all Remainers support this position. Only an elite, the elite in London, which really doesn't want Brexit, is driving this. Now, if we had that kind of situation, I think the political crisis that we have had up to now, which is a crisis within the elite, then becomes a national crisis. Because, as you absolutely rightly say, an election, for the first time in British history, a vote by the people will have been simply set aside. And then we are in totally uncharted territory. And frankly, I fear for my country.
Okay, Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button. Hit that like button. Share the video with everybody you know. Make sure to click that notifications bell as well so that you get notified when we do publish a new video. When you share the video with people outside of YouTube, that helps us get noticed and it helps this channel grow. And hopefully we can grow to 100,000 subscribers very, very soon with your help. What else, Alexander? You can also get an audio copy of this video on iTunes and Soundcloud. You will find links to those platforms in the description box as well. And don't forget to donate to us if you can on PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribestar. Your donation really helps keep this channel going. And of course, you can buy great merchandise at the Duran shop. Lavrov mugs there and Alpha Force mugs.
And Alpha Force mugs and other amazing mugs.
And shirts and all kinds of other
shirts. And amazing shirts like the one I'm wearing now with a Duran double-headed eagle, keeping an eye on all these things. I mean, you were talking about how complicated the story is. How can we understand these complicated things if we don't get refreshment from great mugs, magic mugs like this, and if we don't have the confidence that comes from wearing wonderful shirts like this one, 100% cotton shirt. And
don't edit. Even your dog agrees.
Even my dog agrees. Isn't that right, Solveig? Come. Anyway, there we go. So these are fantastic shirts, and we got lots of them. We got short sleeve shirts like this one. We got long sleeve shirts. We got polo neck shirts. We got hoodies. We got stickers. All fantastic quality things.
See, Solveig agrees once again. Buy a shirt. Buy a mug.
You see, my dog is entirely enthusiastic about all of these things. So yes, she's agreeing. She's absolutely agreeing. So go to our shops, buy this great merchandise, all these great things, look great in it, feel fantastic after you've drunk from a mug like this. Help the Duran, help yourself. Alex will tell you how to do it.
You'll find a link to the Duran shop in the description box down below, theduranshop.com. And also, I always forget, check us out on BitChute as well. Solveig also likes that as well. BitChute, you will find our channel there. Until next time, everybody, take care.